half an hour outside of Glasgow stands St Peter's Seminary, the concrete shell of a very unusual building. It's a dripping ruin, visited mainly by urban explorers and bored teens. There's little left there to indicate what this strange structure once was. No furniture, no signage, no fixtures and fittings. Only a profusion of overgrown curving structures, burned roof beams, and soaring concrete walls. There's something about St Peter's Seminary that feels more abandoned than your average abandoned building. And perhaps that's because it's been abandoned for way longer than it was ever in use. In fact, the structure has stood empty and decaying for almost 4 decades now, after serving its purpose for little more than 10 years. During that time, it came to look rather the worse for wear, but still somehow rather beautiful. And not just because of the excellent artwork that now adorns its walls and archways. Lovely. So how did this unusual and dramatic structure come to be so thoroughly abandoned? To answer that question, we need to look at why St Peter's ever came to exist in the first place. Rather appropriately, given how much arsonists seem to love it these days, St Peter's Seminary began with a fire. In 1946, a seminary in Bearsden in Glasgow burned down, and a search began for a replacement. It would be a long one, with various plans drawn up, tossed around, and rejected for one reason or another. Nearly 20 years would go by before, in 1960, the plans for a brand new and extremely architecturally exciting seminary outside of Glasgow were finalised and construction began. The building would be raised on the grounds of Kilmahue House, a stone mansion built in the 1800s that was already in use as a theological school by the Roman Catholic Church. Unlike its rather Gothic-looking neighbour, the new seminary would be a bold, brutalist design, the kind of thing that was rather popular right after World War II, and looked a bit like it had been inspired by a bomb shelter. Lots of concrete archways, little square windows, and dramatic angular bits. Not to mention this rather ambitious pyramid-like skylight. However exciting it was, the project was plagued with problems from the beginning. On the day the very first sod was cut by Archbishop Donald Campbell, it rained heavily, and rain continued to make itself a nuisance throughout the construction process, turning a 2.5-year project into one that took 5 years. This ever-extending timeline was not helped by the architects, who insisted on making constant tweaks and changes as the building came together, to the point that the builders actually working on site nicknamed them the Altar Boys. When it was finally ready for use on the 1st of October 1966, the new occupants were greeted with a flood, leading one to remark in an interview with the Dumbarton Reporter, "This morning, floodwaters greeted our arrival in the chapel, but there was no Moses to conduct us through." Still, with such a unique and bold design, you've got to expect some teething trouble, right? The architects, Gillespie, Kidd and Koya, for whom the unique structure was a 3,000-ton feather in their caps, weren't overly concerned by a little water ingress. They were too busy fending off the press with a pointy stick. Interviews and features were granted to such sexy publications as Concrete Quarterly, and students from architectural schools all over the country wrote in requesting tours. But even as the firm that designed it swept up a wheelbarrow of architectural awards, the problems for the newly built seminary just kept piling up. The place was noisy, the seating uncomfortable, and despite multiple attempts to fix the guttering, water just kept leaking into the structure. The leaks were so bad that the Scotsman referred to it, rather smirkingly, as the Holy Seminary, and a backup portable altar was brought in for when the main one got too damp to use. All that, and bits would sometimes fall off as well. In 1974, the rector, one Father McMahon, penned a beautifully understated letter to the architects which contained the phrase, "It may be of interest to you that the roof over the stairway in the classroom block has collapsed." But that wasn't all. Throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Roman Catholic Church was changing rapidly. It was decided that isolating priests in seminaries was no longer the way to go, and that it would be a much better education if they were embedded in the midst of the communities they hoped to serve. Imagine being told that seminaries are going out of style after you've just spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on a brand new state-of-the-art seminary. But out of style it was, not just because seminaries themselves were no longer all the rage, but because it was set up for a bygone era. The rooms priests lived and studied in resembled old-fashioned monastic cells, which didn't really fly in the swinging 60s. Plus, ordination rates were dropping all over the world. A pain in the neck, given that the building had been sketched out based on the idea that ordination rates were going to keep on rising. Even at its peak, the place was only ever at 50% of its maximum capacity, which made the massive, airy lecture rooms look a bit daft. All of this led to the decision to abandon the seminary in 1980. It just wasn't working out, and the few priests who remained in training there were swiftly accommodated elsewhere. For a short time, the seminary building was used as home base for a drug rehabilitation project, but by 1984, this too had moved on, and the building, having served its intended purpose for just under 14 years, officially entered its afterlife. Wind, rain, vandals, and nature all took their toll, chipping away at the woodwork of the place year after year. Fire was also an ongoing concern, with several attempts to set the mostly concrete place ablaze. Once the woodwork was all gone, the seminary decayed its way into fireproofness. But the adjacent Kilmahue house wasn't quite so lucky. When it was damaged by fire in 1994, it was found to be structurally unsound and was demolished to prevent it from collapsing and damaging the seminary, which by now was a listed building. There were some protests, mainly about the fact that the old house had been there first, and the seminary was just an extension, but they fell on deaf ears, and Kilmahue House was bulldozed. Meanwhile, accolades for the decaying seminary kept on rolling in, even as it fell to pieces. In 2005, Prospect magazine named it Scotland's greatest post-World War II building, and in the years which followed, it was placed on a bunch of endangered building lists, none of which stopped it from looking like this. Apart from a one-off use for an art project in 2016, the decline has been pretty steady. Proposals have been raised, considered, and rejected time and time again. Housing? No. A spa? No. A monument complete with a visitor centre and gift shop? No. The thorny question of what to do with this abandoned yet architecturally beloved building remains. For now, it's a ruin, a dilapidated relic of concrete and weeds. St. Peter's Seminary is a building that has been empty for longer than it was ever in use. More than twice as long, in fact. It's a ghost of a building, a fading impression of what it once was, with less and less left behind with each passing year. It isn't doomed. Its listed status, plus the fact that it's pure concrete, means that it's pretty resilient to demolition. But the difficulty of turning it into something new means that it could remain abandoned for quite some time to come. If ghosts are the psychic impressions that people leave on a place, we have to consider the implication of St. Peter's Seminary having had 40 years of abandonment after just 14 years of occupation. If anyone ever does encounter a ghost here, it's far less likely to be the lonely spirit of a priest in training, and much more likely to be the spirit of one of those who wandered here during its many, many years of abandonment.